Today in this video, I'm going to share with you homeschooling during the pandemic and beyond. I am doing a series. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. There is a part 1 where I talk about modern day homeschooling starting from the 1970s, and that link is in the description box below. And without further ado, we're going to talk about homeschooling starting from the pandemic. So we all know what happened in the spring of 2020. I can tell you exactly where I was. I literally was at Disney World. I was at Hollywood Studios, and I remember leaning over to an employee there, and I looked at her and I said, "Do you think this is going to affect everyone?" And she's like, "Nah, I don't think so. I'm sure Disney will stay open. We never shut down." And then I remember literally the next day, and I went to Costco, and it was like literally what everybody was talking about. Everything just changed. And one of the biggest things that changed is all the schools were closed down. Now, it didn't affect us. We were already homeschooling. A lot of public school parents were coming to me for help because they didn't know what to do. And so, after 3 months of not having their kids in school, the parents started to realize a couple of things. Of course, one was, I need to homeschool my kid because they're not teaching them correctly in the public schools. They were hearing things, they were seeing how other kids behaved, they got a taste of what it was like, and they were like, you know what? I'm homeschooling. And so the withdrawals started to happen. I know in my state alone, or actually in my city alone, we are up to 20,000 homeschoolers, which is a lot. Actually, that's a lot. But here's the thing, the U.S. Census Bureau reported that homeschooling doubled from 5.4% of households in 2019 to 11.1% by fall of 2020. And in some states, it actually tripled. I will say it tripled in Florida. I know it tripled, it maybe quadrupled, because Florida just exploded. The pandemic fueled the rise of online learning platforms. Parents were already accustomed to this idea of just sitting their kids in front of a screen and have them learning right off the screen, because they did that during the spring of 2020. So why not continue down that row, but this time they had control of the education, thinking that it was going to be better that way. So of course, businesses, curriculum writers, people in general just started putting stuff online to purchase. Much of them, though, I will say, was secular, because now the market wasn't just specific Christian families. It was also secular families that were wanting to homeschool for reasons that were not biblical based. And why not create secular content? The Christians will use it and the secular kids will use it. And that's true. Like I said, the damage is done. We ourselves were raised in the public schools. I was a public school student. I was a public school teacher. And there was this humanist mentality, this humanist teaching that was taught to me. And I believed it. And it's harder to unravel that and jump right into biblical faith-based learning than it is to just stick with it and keep education separate from when I go to services or when I pray to God. Why does it have to be connected? And I still to this day have a lot of, evaluations and consultations where the parent will say, I don't really want, even though I am Christian, I don't want a Christian curriculum. I want something that's academically rigorous for my child. I'm not worried about the Bible, basically. And they could do that at church. That's kind of the mentality. So here are some fun little graphs to look at, because sometimes seeing this visual image will give a better idea of what things look like. So this is from the National Center for Education Statistics, 2019. That was pre-pandemic versus emergent post-pandemic trends. So if you look like the household spring 2020, a little bit over 5%. And then in the fall of 2020, it's like 11. That's the 11.1% right there. So then you come over to the motivations for homeschooling. And the pre-pandemic is going to be the light red, post-pandemic is dark red. And huge difference with religious instructions, the pre and the post. And then safety concerns, pre-pandemic, not very important, but post, it is. And academic dissatisfaction kind of stayed the same. It kind of gives you an idea of the type of people that decided to homeschool. We start to now see technology play a role in education. So we've got things like OutSchool. There's also Khan Academy, which was, pretty popular before, but it really exploded during this time. And then Time for Learning, once again, was popular, was there, but it really exploded. ABC Mouse, Duolingo. I don't know about you, just my opinion. I don't think Duolingo constitutes for a language curriculum. So there's ed tech innovations. There's virtual reality learning, interactive apps, gamified education. Curriculum companies start to pivot fast. They're creating pandemic-friendly offerings, printable packets, video-based learning, interactive platforms, many with no religious affiliations. There is so much out there now. It's incredibly overwhelming because now they're not just printing the packets, they're printing the packets and selling them as ebooks. Now, I do want to take a second to talk about microschools. I know in our state, specifically the microschools, well, there's no regulations. They're popping up like crazy. People love that idea of co-ops where you get together with other Christian families or just families in general that have like interests and you teach your kids together. You have a friend, you just go over to the house and you just do school together in the house, and usually the moms are in the kitchen cooking together and talking, and the kids are doing bookwork together, or they're running around outside and playing, and you know, that was kind of what the co-ops looked like back then. They would sit down and do science experiments together with their friends in a house, and sometimes they got so big that they met in a church. Now we've got these things called microschools that are popping up. So to give you just a quick idea, they're very similar to one-room schoolhouses, but they usually take place in the home. It's this desire for flexibility, personalized education. It's secular in nature. They, like I said, mostly meet in homes, community centers, and libraries sometimes, but they're run by parents or just an adult in general that is the guide that's taking them through there. All the curriculum is provided from the actual company, and the business model of a microschool operates like an MLM, and there's no regulations. So you could be sitting in a home and next to you have a microschool and then a daycare, an at-home daycare on the other side of you. And the daycare is so heavily regulated, but the microschools can do whatever they want. It's a little bit scary. It's a lot scary to me. And it's because they're coming up so fast. But all the curriculum, like I said, once again, all their curriculum is provided by an actual company. So there's not much flexibility to that. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention is with microschools, it is a drop-off program. Usually it's not like the mom, unless the mom is like, you know, part of the organization or the business, so to speak, because they do set you up as a small business. The company does. They teach, like I said, MLM style. So, but usually the mom is by herself with all the kids, and if there's another mom that wants to step in, usually they're part of the business. Otherwise, it's drop-off. And it's about 10 kids, by the way. Approximately 10 kids. So here we are today, coming from a long way where homeschooling was very, very small, with 6,000 people maybe, and then the Christian homeschool boom in the 1980s and 90s, and all the way through the 2000 introduction to internet, more curriculum, and now the pandemic. After the pandemic, I feel like the Christian homeschool family that decides to homeschool their kids from a biblical-based perspective is getting drowned out. We don't know who out there is on the same wavelength as us. We may have our child enroll in a homeschool home education program that says they're Christian, yet you walk in and the majority of the people there are not. Second thing I want to mention is a lot of parents out there are so used to sending their kids to public school and that norm. They're also used to the internet that they're not afraid to just stick their kid in front of a computer for 5-6 hours a day and have the computer teach them without them themselves keeping their children accountable. It's very tempting and very easy, especially as they get older. But coming back and bringing our kids back to community, that's hard and challenging in this day and age, but so incredibly necessary. So some of the things that I just quickly wrote down, most homeschoolers are becoming secular in their education. So there's a lot of pressure from secular homeschoolers and educational institutions. And that's coming from, you know, like our background as former public school students, because, you know, it was done that way. That's what we're used to, and we default to that sometimes, but there is some pressure. So now, you know, the government itself is trying to push their way to have more control of the homeschoolers by giving them money and saying, oh, well, you know, we gave you this money, can't we give you standardized tests? And whenever we introduce standardized tests, into a household, all of a sudden we start to think, oh my gosh, I got to teach that test because we want our children to do good. So in a sense, they're actually now dictating what they teach our kids. And that's like the starting point. They're coming in and saying, oh, we're giving you this money to homeschool your kids. Let us have more control over what you're teaching your kids. Let us help. They're using that, oh, let us help you. Let us help you. There is a wide variety of curriculum, both secular and watered down Christian education. And I think that is actually happening a lot more because of business. Supply and demand. It's great to say you're a Christian organization, but if you're trying to make this into a living and there's more secular homeschoolers, why not just water it down a little bit and be able to share your curriculum with everyone? You know, the secular community can just like ignore the Christian antidotes, which I can think of many homeschool curriculum right now that do that. But there are some very good, solid, faith-based curriculum out there that still stands. You know, one, as I mentioned before, Apologia, they've been around for years. My Father's World, that I actually am sometimes really mad at myself for not using that curriculum. The Mystery of History, we use Truth Quest. Both of those are really good. But, you know, watered down Christian education, not those that I mentioned, but so many others out there. There's also a lack of Christian community and co-ops. And once again, it's people labeling themselves as Christian and not really being a Christian home education program. Also, parents are not networking like they used to and relying on each other like they used to. There's this lack of community. We have everything. It's right there in front of us. We've got the internet. We've got the homeschool co-op down the street that we pay money to send our kids. And we've got everything. There's also mixed priorities that are happening. It's the same thing that happened in public school. There's so many things to do, and there's so many things to think about. Why do we need to think about God? And I say that because we all know it happens. It's such a horrible thing to say, but let's think about it. You know, we get in that college loop where we get so focused on sending our kids to college or technical school that is this what the Lord wants them to do? And is this the way in which the Lord wants them to do this? Sports, athletics. Some people get really obsessed with sports that they're willing to sacrifice. Oh, that's another thing. Sacrifice meeting at church or going to church. And the arts, the fine arts. That's the one that kind of gets under my skin. And I struggle so much with that one. So we actually spent some time shopping around for different musicals that she could be a part of. And we got to pick, you know. But it did get to the point where every single musical that was being offered, I did not morally agree. I mean, when did the Addams Family? I don't want my daughter doing the Addams Family. And we have to be very, very careful what musical, what plays our kids get involved. However, the problem is that there's so many of them and taking over our community and life, and everybody's doing it as if you're missing out. So we have to get involved too. You know, just because our neighbor's doing it or our best friend at the co-op is doing it with her daughter doesn't mean that we need to join in to have that kind of community when what's being taught to those kids, you know, with that play is not good. And of course, burnout. We are doing so much that we get burnt out and we don't have time to connect with God and pray and connect with our community in a faith-based, godly way. Churches and Christian communities are becoming more watered down. And there's a fabulous book. There's many fabulous books out there. One that comes to mind, Ken Ham wrote recently. I'll put what it's called. I can't remember the name, but I'll put right there. But there are just too many opportunities, too much to do, and without realizing it, our priorities have completely changed. So what can we do? Go against the grain. That's what we have to do. We have to put our priorities in order. Youth group, youth groups usually meet twice a week. Are you sacrificing that time with your youth group to go do something else or practice? I think what needs to happen, this is just my opinion, when it comes to our homeschool kids, we need to push them to be leaders in their youth groups, leaders in their community, doing Bible studies with other kids. That's my thoughts. Leave your thoughts in the comment down below. And don't forget to check out the first video of this series to see a little bit more of how this all started with the modern movement, because I think it's really important that we talk about this. Because we get focused like, oh, I'm homeschooling my kids, and then magically they're going to be like these amazing Christian smart kids. When in reality, those kids that were homeschooled 30 years ago, it's totally different than what's going on today. We have to be vigilant as parents. It's too easy to get sucked in, to be honest. So thank you guys so much for watching this. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.